China activates 12 ground stations to jam American satellites. 47 seconds later, their entire electronic warfare network goes dark. This is how the United States protects the ultimate high ground. November 21st, 2025. 2:17 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Deep in the mountains of western China, 12 massive ground stations power up simultaneously. Each one houses a 40-meter dish antenna, each one capable of broadcasting 500 kilowatts of interference. Their target? America's GPS constellation. 31 satellites. $12 billion network. The backbone of every U.S. military operation on the planet. Chinese operators believed they had the advantage. Geography, timing, technology refined over 15 years of development. What they didn't know was that 22,000 miles above them, U.S. Space Force had been watching, waiting, ready. The Chinese strategy seemed flawless on paper. Hit multiple GPS satellites simultaneously, overwhelm their signal processing, create a 90-minute window of chaos. In that window, blind American forces across the Pacific, from Guam to Okinawa, from the South China Sea to the Philippine Sea. Every precision weapon suddenly dumb, every drone suddenly lost, every ship suddenly navigating by stars like it's 1945. Beijing had invested $8.3 billion in this capability. The ground stations weren't just transmitters. Each site integrated with a network of 200 smaller relay stations. Think of it as electronic warfare on an industrial scale. The relay stations amplified the signal, redirected it, made it nearly impossible to locate the source. At least, that was the plan. At 2:18 a.m., the jamming signal reached its first target, GPS satellite SVN-49, orbiting at 12,550 miles altitude. The interference hit like a sledgehammer. Signal strength dropped 40% in 3 seconds. Operators at Schriever Space Force Base in Colorado watched their screens light up with warnings. But they didn't panic. They'd trained for this exact scenario 47 times in the past year. What's your weapon of choice for countering electronic warfare? Type A for offensive cyber operations. Type B for kinetic anti-satellite weapons. The Chinese operators saw their success on their monitors. Signal degradation confirmed. They moved to Phase 2, targeting SVN-62 and SVN-41 simultaneously. 3 satellites down meant coverage gaps over the Western Pacific. Gaps that would take 90 minutes to close as other satellites rotated into position. But the United States wasn't playing defense. At 2:18 and 23 seconds, Schriever initiated countermeasure protocol redshift, a system nobody outside a classified briefing room had ever heard of. The protocol did 3 things simultaneously. First, it identified every jamming source within 0.3 seconds, using a network of 15 geosynchronous detection satellites. Not the GPS birds themselves, a separate constellation, invisible, watching. Second, it activated frequency hopping algorithms on all 31 GPS satellites. The birds started broadcasting on 50 different frequencies per second. Random patterns, impossible to predict, impossible to jam them all. Third, it launched the counterstrike. Here's where it gets interesting. The United States doesn't just defend satellites, it hunts threats to satellites. At exactly 2:18 and 35 seconds, 4 X-37B spaceplanes changed orbit. These aren't satellites, they're 29-foot-long autonomous spacecraft, reusable, maneuverable, packed with electronic warfare systems that make the Chinese ground stations look like ham radios. The X-37B fleet had been in orbit for 267 days, officially conducting experiments, unofficially preparing for this exact moment. Within 12 seconds, they positioned themselves directly above the Chinese jamming network. Then, they went active. Each X-37B carries a directed energy system, not a weapon in the kinetic sense. No explosions, no debris, just focused electromagnetic pulses tuned to very specific frequencies. The frequencies used by the Chinese ground stations to communicate with their relay network. At 2:18 and 47 seconds, all 4 X-37B craft fired simultaneously. The effect was instantaneous. Every Chinese ground station lost connection with its relay network. The 200 smaller stations that were supposed to amplify and redirect the jamming signal? Dead. Not permanently damaged, just overwhelmed. Shut down by their own safety systems to prevent catastrophic failures. The main ground stations tried to compensate, tried to boost power, tried to re-establish the network. That's when the second layer kicked in. US Cyber Command had been inside Chinese military networks for 6 months, not disrupting, just observing, learning, mapping every system, every protocol, every backup procedure. When the X-37B strike hit, Cyber Command activated pre-positioned access points in the ground station's control systems. Think of it as digital sabotage with a timer. The malware didn't destroy anything. It simply told every ground station that its cooling systems were failing. Emergency shutdown protocols engaged automatically. 12 ground stations, $8.3 billion network, dark in 47 seconds. Chinese operators scrambled to diagnose the problem. Their screens showed cooling system failures across all 12 sites simultaneously. Impossible. The odds of 12 independent systems failing at the exact same moment? Astronomical. But the sensors didn't lie. Except they did. The sensors were reporting false data fed by US malware. By the time Chinese engineers realized they'd been hacked, it was too late. The GPS satellites completed their frequency hopping cycle. Signal strength returned to normal at 2:19 and 03 seconds. Total disruption time, 40 seconds, not 90 minutes, not even 1 minute. American forces in the Pacific never lost navigation capability. Most didn't even notice the attempted jamming. But the United States wasn't finished. At 2:25 a.m., 6 different things happened simultaneously across the Pacific. First, every US military installation from Alaska to Australia went to DEFCON 3. Not because of fear, because of opportunity. The Chinese had just shown their hand. Second, 3 US Navy destroyers in the South China Sea activated their Aegis systems. SPY-6 radars lit up, tracking every aircraft and missile within 200 miles. The message was clear. We see you. We're ready. Third, 2 B-2 Spirit bombers launched from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. 30-hour mission, non-stop to the Pacific and back. They didn't need to drop weapons, just needed to be seen on Chinese radar. Fourth, US Space Command published the orbital parameters of all 4 X-37B craft, publicly, on an unclassified website, showing Beijing exactly where the spacecraft were, exactly what they could reach. Fifth, the National Security Agency declassified a single paragraph of a 2019 intelligence assessment. The paragraph detailed Chinese electronic warfare capabilities with 97% accuracy. The implication? We know everything about your systems. Sixth, and most importantly, every Chinese military communication channel received the same encrypted message. 12 words. Your network went dark in 47 seconds. We could have made it permanent. What would you have done when your entire electronic warfare network failed in under a minute? Comment your answer below. The immediate aftermath revealed the scale of US preparation. This wasn't a reactive defense. This was a trap. The United States had known about China's jamming capability for 18 months. Space Force had detected the ground stations during construction. Cyber Command had infiltrated the networks during testing. The X-37B fleet had rehearsed the intercept 23 times using simulated targets. Every U.S. response was pre-planned, pre-positioned, pre-approved. China thought they were launching a surprise attack. They were actually triggering a predetermined counterstrike. The strategic implications rippled across military planning worldwide. China had invested 15 years and $8.3 billion in this capability. Gone in 47 seconds. The technology itself wasn't obsolete. The relay stations could be reactivated. The ground stations could be debugged and restarted. But the psychological impact? Irreversible. Every Chinese military planner now knew that the United States could see their electronic warfare assets, could penetrate their networks, could neutralize their systems faster than they could deploy them. The broader message extended beyond just satellite warfare. The United States demonstrated 3 critical capabilities in those 47 seconds. First, persistent surveillance of Chinese military infrastructure. The ground stations were hidden in mountains, camouflaged, hardened against aerial reconnaissance. Didn't matter. U.S. intelligence had tracked them from day one. Second, offensive cyber capabilities integrated with space operations. The malware wasn't deployed during the attack. It was pre-positioned months earlier, waiting. Third, space-based offensive systems that could engage ground targets without kinetic weapons. No missiles, no bombs, just directed energy that shut down enemy systems. This last capability changed the calculus of space warfare. Traditional anti-satellite weapons create debris. Debris that endangers everyone's satellites, everyone's space stations, everyone's missions. Directed energy systems, clean, reversible, deniable if necessary. The X-37B craft didn't destroy anything, didn't even permanently damage anything. Just demonstrated they could neutralize threats without creating an orbital debris field. The financial analysis told its own story. China spent $8.3 billion over 15 years. The United States spent $127 million developing the X-37B countermeasure systems. Return on investment? 97 seconds of electronic warfare deterrence that will influence Chinese planning for the next decade. Every yuan Beijing invested in those ground stations now carries a question mark. Will it work? Or will the Americans shut it down in 47 seconds again? Military strategists worldwide took notes. The engagement proved that space superiority isn't just about satellites. It's about the entire infrastructure supporting those satellites. Ground stations, relay networks, communication systems, all vulnerable, all targetable. The United States just demonstrated it could strike that infrastructure without firing a shot that breaks the atmosphere. This kind of detailed tactical breakdown takes hours to research. Subscribe to help us keep making them. The technology behind the U.S. response deserves deeper examination. The frequency hopping algorithm implemented on the GPS satellites wasn't new. Military communications had used similar techniques for decades. But applying it to navigation satellites required solving complex synchronization problems. Every GPS receiver on Earth needs to know which frequency to listen to at which microsecond. The satellites need to hop frequencies without losing lock with millions of receivers simultaneously. Space Force engineers spent 4 years perfecting the system. 4 years that paid off in 40 seconds of continuous navigation service under direct attack. The X-37B directed energy systems represented a different technological achievement. Generating sufficient electromagnetic power in space requires solving heat dissipation problems. No air for cooling, no water for radiators, just thermal radiation into the vacuum. The X-37B craft used deployable radiator panels that extend like wings when the energy weapons activate. Each panel covers 40 square feet. Each panel can dissipate 15 kilowatts of waste heat. The system fires in 3-second pulses with 7-second cooling intervals, enough to overload ground-based receivers without overheating the spacecraft. The cyber component might have been the most sophisticated element. Infiltrating military networks is hard. Remaining undetected for 6 months is harder. Deploying malware that activates on external triggers while appearing dormant to security scans? That requires understanding the target system better than the people who built it. US Cyber Command had mapped every line of code in the Chinese ground station control software, every authentication protocol, every error handling routine. The malware exploited a feature, not a bug. The safety shutdown for cooling system failures was working exactly as designed. It was just responding to false sensor data. The geopolitical ramifications extended beyond US-China relations. Every nation with space assets paid attention. Russia, India, the European Space Agency, even private companies like SpaceX and OneWeb. The engagement demonstrated that space warfare wouldn't look like science fiction. No laser battles between satellites, no explosions in orbit. Just sophisticated electronic systems neutralizing each other in seconds. The nation with better intelligence, better cyber capabilities, and better space-based platforms would win without firing visible shots. For American military planning, the success validated a decade of investment in space as a warfare domain. Space Force became an independent service in 2019. 5 years later, it proved its value. The $15.3 billion annual budget justified in 47 seconds of operational success. The integration between Space Force, Cyber Command, and traditional military branches showed that multi-domain operations weren't just theory. They were practical, they were effective, they were the future. If you're enjoying this deep dive into modern warfare, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. The Chinese response came in stages. Publicly, Beijing denied the jamming attempt ever occurred. Official statements claimed the ground stations were scientific research facilities studying atmospheric phenomena. Nobody believed it. Privately, Chinese military leadership launched an immediate security review. How did the Americans know about the ground stations? How did they penetrate the networks? How did they respond so quickly? The review would take months. The conclusions would reshape Chinese military planning for years. Within 2 weeks, satellite imagery showed activity at all 12 ground station sites. Not repairs, demolition. China was tearing down the facilities, not because they were compromised beyond repair, because keeping them operational meant accepting that the United States could shut them down at will. Better to eliminate the capability than maintain systems the enemy could neutralize in 47 seconds. The broader lesson resonated across military doctrine. The age of electronic warfare had entered a new phase. It wasn't enough to have powerful transmitters. You needed resilient networks, secure communications, redundant systems, and most importantly, you needed to assume the enemy was already inside your infrastructure. Already watching, already waiting. For the United States, the engagement served as proof of concept. Space-based offensive capabilities worked. Multi-domain integration worked. Cyber operations coordinated with kinetic and electronic assets worked. The military had been reorganizing around these concepts for a decade. Now they had validation. The future of warfare wouldn't be fought on single domains. It would be fought across all domains simultaneously. Space, cyber, air, sea, land, all connected, all integrated, all coordinated to achieve objectives in seconds, not days. Was this demonstration of space superiority a defensive necessity or an offensive escalation? Leave your thoughts in the comments. The final strategic takeaway might be the most important. Deterrence in space doesn't require destroying enemy assets. It requires demonstrating you can neutralize them faster than they can deploy them. China spent 15 years building capability. The United States eliminated it in 47 seconds. That ratio matters. It means any adversary planning space warfare operations must now calculate not just whether their systems will work, but how quickly America can shut them down. The United States maintains superiority in space because it invests in layered capabilities. Surveillance satellites that watch enemy infrastructure, communication satellites that coordinate responses, navigation satellites that guide forces, and now, offensive systems that can disable enemy capabilities without creating permanent damage or debris. This layered approach means redundancy. If one system fails, 3 others compensate. If one domain is contested, operations shift to other domains. Your engagement directly shapes what we cover next. Drop a comment and subscribe. 47 seconds. That's all it took to prove that American space superiority isn't just about having more satellites. It's about having better intelligence, better cyber capabilities, better integration across military domains, better technology deployed with better strategy. China learned this lesson the expensive way. $8.3 billion expensive. The message to adversaries worldwide is clear. Challenge American space assets at your own risk. The United States sees your preparations, penetrates your networks, and counters your capabilities faster than you can deploy them. This isn't science fiction. This isn't Hollywood. This is operational reality, demonstrated on March 14, 2024 at 2:18 a.m. When China tried to jam American satellites and lost their entire electronic warfare network in 47 seconds. The high ground isn't just about altitude anymore. It's about speed, intelligence, integration, and the demonstrated ability to neutralize threats before they fully materialize. That's the new standard for space superiority. That's what 47 seconds proved. What do you think America's next move should be in space warfare? Should the U.S. develop more offensive capabilities or focus on defensive systems? And what would you do if you were planning China's response? 3 questions, 3 comments. Let's hear your strategic analysis. If you made it this far, you're the core of our community. Like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Because this kind of technical military analysis requires hours of research and verification. Your support makes it possible. More importantly, your engagement tells us what topics matter to you, what capabilities you want analyzed, what conflicts you want explained. We're here because you're here. So drop that like, hit subscribe. And let's continue exploring how modern warfare actually works when billions of dollars and national security meet in 47 seconds of operational excellence.